why leave a successful private sector career as an entrepreneur and get into this race at this time?
Real simple. I came to the realization that the people that are running our country didn't understand the economic issues that were causing the country so much problem. Second, they're all so concerned about their reelection that they won't do the right thing and take the principled or tough stand to get our country back on the right track. The path we're heading, Shaun, to be bluntly honest, we're going to go through a financial collapse, no different than Greece, no different than what's rattling the equity markets today with Spain, which looks like it's getting ready to follow Greece. We have more debt than all but 3 European countries. Countries have tried this path before, and that's to spend their way out of misery and borrow their way, and it's always resulted in disaster. So I sat back and looked at it, and it's not something I did lightly at all. I frankly don't like the prospects of the lifestyle, but you realize that, if you're not willing to make a sacrifice for your country and go serve, well, the repercussions are so profound, it not only devastates our lifestyles, but, destroys the opportunities for our children and grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard you definitely express a sense of urgency relating to the debt. What do you see as the time frame before we reach a catastrophic outcome or the collapse?
I think at best we have is 4 or 5 years, and that's best case. My more likely probable outcome is about 2.5 to 3 years. I think we'll already start seeing the big negative effects within 12, 18 months. But you just can't continue at this rate. Either we will eventually result in default, which if the U.S. Treasury ever defaulted on its debt, and I'm not talking a technical default like they stop payments, but a real default. If that happens, then we're talking unemployment rates of 30, 40%, no different than the Great Depression at all, and that's around the globe. And I don't even want to get into that discussion because it's so, it's not just what happens economically, but, World War I and World War II were caused by economic collapses. And so there's huge societal problems.
Do you think that there's any chance? I'm sorry. Is there any chance
go ahead.
that runaway inflation will happen before a hard default because of the way they're trying to monetize the debt?
Well, that's exactly where I was going. Or the other course, which they've already taken, is to try to monetize the debt. And we've had quantitative easing 1, quantitative easing 2. We're having Operation Twist. And what is that? That, in essence, is money printing. They're monetizing the government's debt. Last year, the Federal Reserve bought 61% of all treasuries issued. I mean, that's just government buying its own debt. And what's the result of that? You will eventually get runaway inflation. I don't call it even inflation. I call it squeezeflation. And what do I mean by squeezeflation? Inflation in the 70s was inflation in wages, in asset prices, housing and stocks, and wage inflation in service and prices of goods. And at different times, different areas were surging, and it started just continuously unraveling the markets and caused the stock market would swing up and then crash down, and housing and all the rest. But this time around, when you have a real unemployment rate of 15.1%, when you factor in discouraged workers who have left the labor force or people that have a part-time job but want a full-time job, you're not going to get any wage inflation. You're not getting any asset price inflation in housing, and I'll get to that in a second, and you're getting it in stocks to a degree. But what you are getting is massive price inflation. And why is that happening? Because investors around the globe that hold dollars say, I don't want a dollar that's devaluing, so they've poured into gold. That's why gold's gone from $400 a cubic ounce to $1,650. They poured into silver, tin, copper, nickel, any of the base metal prices. How about food stock? Look at what's happened to corn, wheat, cocoa beans, coffee beans, all of that has sent food prices way up. Hasn't helped the farmers much because what also has gone straight up? Oil prices, gas prices. So I'm trying to get the message out there that what we're doing is already taking us down this path, and it will eventually lead to massive squeezeflation. And why housing values aren't increasing, because if people's wages aren't going up, but all the basic necessities of feeding their family and heating their home and driving their car is going up, well, they have less money to be able to afford a mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the housing market stuck. And at some point, equities and stocks will collapse because as all these base metal prices and fuel prices keep going up and they can't pass through those goods, the cost of those goods, because the American consumer just can't bear it, those will get cracked. So it's a fool's path to insolvency. And eventually, that's what ended up happening in Germany after the Weimar Republic. It's happened in Argentina. It's happened all over the globe. And the single best book ever written just came out last year. And it's This Time is Different, 8 Centuries of Financial Follies, written by Reinhardt and Roganoff, two very esteemed researchers, economic researchers. And it tracks all the government defaults or currency debasements and hyperinflation for the last 8 centuries. We're going right down the path of countries that have done this time after time and failed time after time again.
So you see a similar timeline when it comes to hyperinflation as you see with the default. It's just...
Yeah, I mean, they may be able to push it out. That's why I say it could play out for, 5-6 years, and what they'll do is they'll just try to inflate, and eventually the inflation will just, as I said, it's not going to come into wages, but for maybe specific wages, and what it's going to finally do is you'll crack, and the whole thing will just send you back into a deflationary cycle.
That leads to another kind of interesting question. There's a lot of talk, obviously, of a QE3 out there. Some people think it's imminent. Do you think that in an election year that almost becomes a political tool that the Fed and the Treasury can use to get Obama reelected? I know this is a little off topic, but I'm just curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely can be used that way. The problem that the Fed has right now is inflation's running hotter than they like, and the fact that you have people on the Federal Reserve Board, they're a minority, but like Richard Fisher, who is adamantly opposed to any more of this. Then again, Hoening was before, and he's now off. So, if Bernanke could, load up for another QE3, I think Bernanke knows that any Republican that gets elected will not reappoint him, even though he came from the Bush administration. But, the guy has no end game. That's his problem. He's an academic that's done the study about the Great Depression, and he thinks the solution is to do everything opposite that they did in the Great Depression. Well, just doing the opposite, it doesn't make it right. And he doesn't understand how the financial markets work.